What's up, everybody? Today, I'm pleased to have Joseph Lambrecht with me today to practice some conversation craft here at the Yours Truly virtual studio. I first bumped into Joseph on one of Paul Vanderklay's Friday afternoon Bridges of Meaning Discord live stream Q&As. The topic of conversation was centered around American Christian Orthodoxy, a topic Joseph has spent a lot of time considering as he converted to Orthodoxy almost a decade ago. It was actually that Paul Vanderklay stream that sparked my first conversation with Graham Pardun several months back. And it seems that at that time, Paul Vanderklay's little corner of the internet, or the PLC, was having an Orthodox moment. During that live stream and in several others Joseph has taken part in, I have found a fondness for his clear love of his Christian faith and practice and real care for the future of the church he has found a home in, but also for his charitable yet playful trollist participation in this little corner of the internet, the TLC. If you'd like to support this channel, give it a like and a subscribe. If it makes sense with you, share it with friends. And if you believe Yours Truly is something that might be described as worthwhile, you can support the channel financially by becoming a channel member. So check that out, link in the description. On Joseph's YouTube channel, you can find a handful of videos from actual Orthodox liturgy and ceremony, which is such a wild contrast to the Christianity that many modern people, myself included, have experienced in their lifetimes. It's a good example of how the propositions of faith are not the whole picture of what it means to understand religion or a set of beliefs. There are perspectival and procedural ways of knowing, of understanding one's beliefs and sacred practice. Thank you, John Vervaeke. I look forward to continuing a conversation about Orthodoxy today on my channel, but more importantly, getting to know Joseph better myself and share him with you all. So sit back, relax, do your job or your chores, or keep driving while Joseph and I practice some conversation craft as we think out loud today here on the Yours Truly podcast. So without any further delay, I give you Joseph Lambrecht. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. What's up, Joseph?
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna stick us in the let's try this one out. I'm gonna stick us in the close-ups today.
Hey, there we go.
There he is.
Intimate. Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
No, I like this.
As you said backstage, thanks for being patient when we get on. We kind of talked about this a little while back, and I was fumbling around and I didn't quite get there, but
hey, I was playing hard to get too. I was out and you messaged me, and it was in July, and I was actually just going to Boston to finish out my diaconate program through Holy Cross Seminary, the Greek Orthodox Seminary in Boston, Massachusetts, and got that wrapped up. So now I'm officially a diaconal candidate, and hopefully going to get this the process for petitioning for ordination to become an Orthodox deacon. But that's probably well over a year and a half out until these things churn slowly, and that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, that is fine. I think that's part of the counterculture. That's part of, what is it, Graham's book, the most radical counterculture is something about Orthodoxy. I don't remember the title of it exactly. But yeah, man. So before we kind of get into the now.
Oh, yeah.
You said you actually have a rando with Paul Vanderklay from you said around 2017.
Yeah. I was an early adopter to Paul Vanderklay. He doesn't even remember it. And which is great. I love it. I like being mysterious, like surprising people.
Well,
yeah, but no, Paul I was an early adopter to the Peterson landscape as well, Peugeot. In the midst of wave one, as PVK likes to call it.
So what? Why was that important to you?
Oh, sorry.
You don't think it was posted? You don't think y'all's
Yeah, it wasn't posted.
Okay,
It wasn't posted.
What led you to that Peterson landscape? Like, what makes my
Yeah.
question is, what makes a Joseph Lambrecht? You know, so
yeah. Well, I'll tell you. Go
for it.
I'm very proud of the culture I was raised in Minnesota. Got a unique blend of Scandinavian Lutheranism, Bavarian Catholicism, and it's been a big melting pot in that regard. Both have kind of influenced each other. And I grew up Lutheran. I was baptized in the ELCA, and for a multitude of reasons, as you know, the main line kind of crumbled. You know, my family was kind of drifting there, and I think what really pulled me into I guess I want to just label it broadly speaking with the meaning crisis, was this desire to go deeper into something, and an intuition that these replacements for Lutheranism, replacements for these more well-established traditions, be it, and I'm sorry to throw, Mick Moe and others will be offended by this maybe, but what I experienced with, the non-denominational landscape and other sorts of Christian flavors that weren't embedded in a long-standing tradition. I just felt like there was something that was superficial, in the sense that my participation in it was like the kiddie pool. I could know the depths of it front and back, and I was really looking for kind of a ceiling that would be unattainable to grasp. And I think what Peterson did was kind of expose that layer and peel back the things we take for granted. I remember being in college when I first discovered him, and he was talking about well, this was more so on culture war stuff. That's kind of what got him popular. And I remember seeing in like 2016 there was some famous video of him, and I wasn't too interested in the culture war stuff as such, more so shifting towards his lectures on maps of meaning and personalities, and I guess that was my I'm a young guy. I'm 27. So, I was young and dumb kid, even younger and dumber when I was first exposed to Peterson. And I guess that just was, hopefully everyone has a moment where they realize the vastness of the world and the vastness of any given topic. And that was really my moment of saying, wow, this guy who, isn't really a professing Christian as one would expect, but there's this breadth and depth of knowledge on all these various subjects, and there's these subjects that interpenetrate all other subjects. And David Bentley Hart, who's an Orthodox theologian, he says, theology is like the study of everything, that it's the interdisciplinary study par excellence. And I guess that's really the long-winded answer to say it was a perpetual curiosity and searching for an unease of, you have further in the hierarchy to climb up.
Do you feel like, I guess, were y'all practicing Lutheran or Catholic whenever growing up?
Well, so yeah, well, interestingly enough, my dad, Bavarian Catholic, lapsed Catholic, marries full-blooded Norwegian Lutheran lady, and we essentially were raised, with my mother's faith. So yeah, my mom being full-blooded Norwegian Lutheran, we were heavily involved in her sphere as she knew it. And here's the thing about civilizational and cultural religions. It's kind of like just the water you swim in. There's not a super high self-awareness and like in an autistic sense of it. And so just kind of swimming through the motions of it. And like I said, I've been a firsthand experiencer, if that's a word, of the collapse of the main line. And what that looked like in my town specifically was the issue of a gay marriage back in 2012. And literally the town was split down the line between the more conservative and the more liberal, if you want to just put it in those nice little categories, approach to the topic. And we weren't even attending the Lutheran church at this time, but it's just interesting to me to see how these battle lines were drawn on specific issues, and more so interesting how it manifested itself after the fact with the conservative Lutherans. They basically went out of town and they built a new structure, and it looks like a convention center. It looks like a totally secular space, and it's devoid of really liturgical practice. And then you have the liberal ELCA mainline church that is dying in the center of town. And although it is fairly modernistic in its architectural design, it's recognizable as a church, and they still have a liturgical framework in their worship. And so there, I guess something that's always caught me as bizarre is this dichotomy of the social conservatives that break off and kind of really dig down into what has made Protestantism so triumphant with the emphasis on the spoken word, and the more liberal of the Protestants have, oddly enough, conserved more of the tradition with its liturgical practice. But anyways, yeah, now I'm rambling, but that really set the stage for I guess some sort of disconnect where my family was very conservative, still is in these regards. And so that I looked at these developments and I said something was lost here in this community when there was this schism over this issue where you basically segregated yourself on ideological lines. I get it, it's kind of a big deal, but it never sat right with me to dispense with how things were traditionally done in a more communal environment and the disillusion that brought people, because I guess my suspicion against propositional facts and trivia and stances began to erode at a very early age, I guess, seeing all this.
Well, it's interesting because you're technically a Zoomer. I didn't realize.
I'm a Zoomer. It's a I'm in a clot. There's a big I'm an old Zoomer, I'm either, depends who you ask. I'm in this transitionary phase. I'm like Pepe, I'm this border character here. And but no, I can relate to both sides.
But it's interesting that thesis, the popularized, that redeemed Zoomer, you're kind of lived out, because that his kind of thesis of abandoning the institution for doctrinal purity. But it kind of, it's a weird, and he's hitting on, he's like, no, we need to attach ourselves back to he's not saying the Vervaeke things. He's not saying we need to attach ourselves back to the procedural, to the symbolic, but his intuition is the same as yours on that. That's really interesting. Why do you think that the Zoomers were more able to identify that, and the millennials, we were still in kind of we were the puppets of the vision for the boomers. The millennials were like, we weren't their kids, we're their and they gave us all the money and resources to build the convention centers and like, and then we, because I had a Christian rock band, and the guys in my band were at the biggest church in Little Rock, being paid every week to play music, like all that kind of stuff. So I'm a keenly experienced that side of things.
Right.
But it's because of that the contrast then becomes much more clear on this side of it, which I'm still a dirty Protestant, but it's like,
no, and I won't call you that, but
we'll get more into that. But I think that's that it's interesting that you kind of point to Peterson as somebody that burst through the ceiling of the meaning crisis, so that people could see that there's more depth than just what we were. The kind of, I've been playing with the word, the simulacrum of the faith. I've heard Jordan Hall use that word a lot.
Yeah.
And you said there was kind of this, anemic thing. Like when you say, I looked at this and I felt like I could know it inside out, and there was like no depth of mystery or something where I could go deeper. It kind of makes me think of something I was involved in, which was called like the gospel-centered movement, which is like, it was a good impulse to move away from like a type of what was deemed in the culture moral therapeutic deism, which was like, we're teaching people to be moral, and that Jesus is our therapist, and there's a God. Like,
but that is, sorry to cut you off. That's exactly, I think, the crisis that I had was, this appears to be deism. Like my Protestant upbringing basically led me to just think like, I guess we're just deists that care about ethical behavior, and that's about it. And I struggled with the notion of, what's the difference between somebody, and this was proposed in the French Revolution, like what's the difference between somebody who acts like a Christian but denies the Trinity, and somebody who accepts the Trinity but is not as ethical as the non-believer or something, right? And these were things that were propped up to undermine the prevailing religion at the time. But I look at it as a thought experiment back that was disruptive to my deistic kind of thinking and framing of things. And I guess it was helping me understand what grace really is at the end of the day, because I'm bouncing all over the place. I have to get back to what you originally said, but really, I think what has led to this inevitable chaotic zone we're in now was a misunderstanding of grace as this, in the pop culture, it was kind of a nebulous term.
Grace gets you out of hell, like out of a literal hell, kind of like as the only
grace as just this warm feeling of God's love or presence or something. Whereas, the ancients would look at grace as, this is a power. This is a dynamic power for you to overcome the things that humanity will not be able to overcome without this, this special power, basically. And it's a more fearful thing at that point, that it's not this lighthearted thing. It's like, my will is fallen, and the only way for me to spend less time putting my attention on this or that thing, I need to go and obtain grace, and obtain grace through something that basically presents itself as a vehicle for grace. So I think that's why you've seen this turn to more um,
Embodied sacrament.
yeah, right. Because there's a crisis of confidence going on right now, where a lot of people, and I'm not trying to throw Paul Vanderklay down under the bus, but I think a lot of people my age would look at living stones and just like, well, really? Like, why would you want to go to this? And then that takes root in people who are less, I think, articulate or less conscious of themselves, and they will go to the rock band, crazy rave style worship thing. And I'm not trying to throw them on. I understand what they're searching for, and I'm just speaking generally here. Or you have the more emissarian mind, autistic mind, who goes to Roman Catholicism or Orthodoxy or whatever have you. But really, getting back to your original question, is why this shift happened. I think,
and why Zoomers could articulate it and want it so much. I mean, there's a lot of pieces, but go ahead.
Right. Forgive my ramblings there. This all is related because I think video games actually had a big part in this.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
My screen went blank.
Yeah.
So when my screen just went blank. Oh, dang it. So when I said that on that stream,
yeah,
I watched it this morning. You quietly sat there and listened.
Yeah.
And kind of gave a nod.
Yeah.
I may have to pull up that clip so people can see it. Okay.
Yeah. In post. Do it in post. Because I think the shift towards the embodied has really has forced itself into our minds here, when especially with the idea of scaling and levels, as something that is really become predominant in the culture. And by the way, you said in the Afriel conversation, you wish you were part of the gaming culture. No, you don't. It's dead. It's dead. It's maybe 10 years ago, when it was before the internet. Anyways, this is I
was a gamer. I just wasn't. I was more popular, but I've been a gamer my whole life. Like when it wasn't cool, I like Star Wars. I'm turned 40 next year. I was the in between. Like there wasn't a Star Wars. 85 to 95.
Yep.
But I liked it. So I was like always there, but I wasn't in the deeper part of it. But okay, when you said that, and I kind of lost my mind, because I want to paint the picture on the stream that I talked about in our intro, where I met you basically.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I think a lot of people might be going to Orthodoxy because of video games.
Yeah.
And nobody picked it up. Nobody.
No. And this is something Jonathan Pajot said ages ago. He talked about role-playing games and the popularity of something like the Elder Scrolls and Skyrim.
I said the exact thing. Okay, that's funny.
Yeah. And I think stuff like
that's the frame of that's why I kind of got silly. But so you're saying you think video games have a big part of that, scaling and level up and all these kinds of things, like kind of paint the picture a little bit.
Yeah. So you look at the recent wave in terms of video games becoming mainstream is kind of bizarre, because I remember back 15 years ago, it was kind of like still the stigma that you were kind of a nerd if you played games or you played single player games or something like this.
Yes.
But it's become very popularized and very prevalent. And so I think a lot of people are developing an intuition that there is some sort of celestial hierarchy embedded in reality. And you can level up in real life, and you there has been a historic intuition on this, with Dante's, Inferno and Paradise and all these things. So I just think that there's a turn towards, and Vervaeke would like this. There's a turn towards the weirdness. There's a turn towards the celestial, and the desire to basically live this life that was only possible in something like Dragon Ball Z, where you're seeing these power levels that are logarithmic in scope. Where one character is at this power level, and then it gets insanely steep and asymptotic. So I think there's a lot going on there, and these what's also interesting is a lot of these areas where this media is coming out of is a place like Japan, which this is the very strange thing, is that the Far East is introducing people to the I guess the cultural inheritance that was embedded in Christendom, and a new appreciation is born out of that.
Hierarchical and honor and shame, those types of things.
No, I just mean in pure aesthetics, and that well, that too probably, but just this idea that the Western civilization birthed out these tremendous pieces of architecture or technological prowess or whatever it may be, and that there was something special. There was something special in the past.
This opens up, so when I think about Redeem Zoomer, a big part of what he does is Minecraft.
Yeah.
Online. And it's like, okay, I can digitally build a beautiful world.
Mm-hmm.
And I look out at our world and I think, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And and it's like, we can do this because I'm thinking about this. And then, I mean, obviously there's not, you doesn't have to deal with infrastructure and to build something, but the idea is still there. And yet what did we lose? And I look at a cathedral, even our downtown in a small town America, there was more attention and more care with this structure than, say, my Lutheran church that built the convention center on the edge of town.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so certain Zoomers, and especially those within maybe video game culture, because they are looking at an aesthetic, which that was what I hit on in that conversation, was when you play Skyrim and you see this, castle or Assassin's Creed, and you see this cathedral in Rome in the middle of town, and you're experiencing it, but then you get well, that was real.
Mm-hmm.
And but then you're also talking about the leveling up. So to me, that points at sainthood, that points at
sanctity, the purification and illumination of one's soul.
And so that there's obviously rub within, Protestantism, within Lutheranism, with ideas of total depravity. In my conversation with Luke, I talked about Luke Thompson, Whitestone name, Grail Country fame. I talked about there being a kind of implicit nihilism involved in a flat Protestantism, that nothing you can do is good. And
sure.
And so instead of it being a little bit more like a cooperative relationality or something like that, and I'm probably not, I don't know Orthodox theology, but I'm that I can participate, or I can become more true. I can become a more truthful, true person, true creation to what I was made. And of course we talk about sanctification in Protestantism, but it always seems like it's, but I'm just a sinner. And then
yeah, right. No, I hear you. Yeah.
So interface with that
sure. I think the biggest problem that perhaps was lost with the disillusion of the main line was probably this this proclivity to recapitulate the mundane aspects of life and really look at everything about the mundane struggle of be it a parent or a farmer or whatever humble, dull thing in life, and to just bear your cross in those instances. And so what I mean by this is I look at the generation of my grandparents who are all now past, but there was something, and it wasn't perfect, no generation is really perfect in this regard, but there was something that just was enabling them to bear the burden of life, have families of 8, 6 kids, whatever, and live in an underdeveloped rural environment, cold environment, and just grit their teeth and get through to it. And their lives were incredibly meaningful. And I think that the romanticism that has really come into at least the low church Protestant world is there's a sentimentalism that I think is distracting, and a de-emphasis on what love really is. And I think that love ultimately points back to, we understand love through the incarnation. We understand love as a self-emptying act,
sacrifice,
on behalf of the other. And I think that loss of kenotic self-emptying participation and emphasis on it has been detrimental, because you look at what followed in the wake with the boomers was well, why would you want to make things harder? Why wouldn't you want to go do the easiest thing? You're splitting wood with an axe. Why don't you just use a chainsaw? I think a lot of technology development was disruptive. A lot of that pragmatic approach to life of really kind of
washing machines and refrigerators and microwaves.
Well, and those were present previously, but I think there was just something lost. I can't really articulate. I'm thinking out loud now. There was something lost that the emphasis changed. The emphasis changed from and they weren't even conscious of this, but
from survival.
Survival was an element, but it was also, I'm thinking like prairie mode here. I'm thinking to the uniqueness of my ancestral experience in Minnesota, because I've been here 7 generations, 8 generations now, I guess, with my children.
Was Little House on the Prairie, did they come from Minnesota, or did they come they came from
North Dakota, I thought? Okay. Yeah, but that's where my mom's family is from. So I'm just saying, I'm thinking of that whole experience, and there was just a willingness to bear the dull evils of life and to make the most out of it, create a large family that was interconnected and held together by a common house of worship. And it disintegrated with the boomer generation. And I'm not saying that to demonize boomers. It's just a reality, is that is when this explosion in the Protestant world occurred. And I'm really sick of this this apologetical stance that, there's a 13 gazillion Protestant denominations, and it's like, well, that's a little unfair. It's really just we are on the cusp of the dissolution of these long-standing traditions, and we don't know what to make of it. So
the way I look at it, I've recently, the word deconstruction, cultural deconstruction, postmodernism was doing that on purpose, but it trendy until probably a year ago, Christian deconstruction, is kind of like a telos of what you're talking about culturally, that it's gone from the institution to the individual. And that now there's all these individual deconstructions. It's not just, well, my church deconstructed like you experienced as a kid. It's now 30 and 40-year-olds that have deconstructed out of their Christian faith. And that is kind of like this, culturally, we kind of come here and obviously that's part of said meaning crisis at large. And it, was it all Protestantism's fault? Was it all? There's a lot. I think
there's a lot of things going on, but I think the lack of sacramental grounding in the realm of in how the perception and understanding of grace facilitates itself in the church for many Protestant communities, I think was a fatal blow in this regard, and aggravated things, if nothing else.
So here's the question for you, because you mentioned like you kind of maybe were implying that, like, so you're the case study of your experience, your church that you were part of, the Lutheran church that split, almost abandoning this. They wouldn't theologically be abandoning their sacraments, but they kind of did.
Yeah, the focus was on something else.
And so then it becomes, well, what do you really believe?
Mm-hmm.
And you said like the power of evangelicalism to a degree, like there was a power to the movement, I guess you can say, whether it's political, whether it was in its form or whatever. And because that's kind of what I've come to that place. I haven't exactly figured out what exactly to do with it all, but that is what I'm saying is I agree with you, and I think that that abandoning because I mean you see it, like I look at this redeemed Zoomer kid, and sometimes I'm like, he's a little too based for my taste sometimes, but
just give him time.
Yeah, he's younger than you.
Yeah,
and the thing that though that he's hit on that, like he has a very high view, at least propositionally, of the sacraments. And I think that's the interesting thing, is like these things weren't deconstructed overnight, because even part of like Scottish Presbyterian confessions are like, if you don't believe in the Eucharist as the body, like you're damned. Like
right.
And that was a Presbyterian church in Ireland, and so it wasn't like, oh, well, they made a decision and then over, like whatever. But but I definitely think that we're there, and seeing that. I want to take it back to the video game thing, though. Can we tie these two things?
We're bouncing around.
It's okay.
We're figuring out a groove. No, I think this is exactly what grace is essentially your experience points for the for leveling up in the spiritual life, and I think the reason why Zoomers in particularly are looking towards these more established institutional faiths is because aesthetically their intuition is focused on the aesthetical, and it's an easy physical thing to latch onto, as this is going to help me acquire experience points. This is an area for me to engage in and to level up in, and become primarily to stop doing the things I don't want to do. That's a classic, Christian problem, right? Is I'm doing things I don't want to do. And
St. Paul.
Yep. Goes back to St. Paul. And so, that's like I'm dying to slimes in the sewers. I'm level 1 in an RPG, and I'm dying to slimes of all things. And they're trying to overcome these petty passionate patterns that they keep falling back into. So I think that's
and you look for something strong or heroic or historical, that to say, well, there might be an answer here. There might be a way, a path.
It's kind of like and there's not, this isn't arbitrary that there's a lot of crossover with what you saw culturally during the 2016 election, where Donald Trump, being a tall, blonde billionaire, imposing, dominating figure, as somebody,
big buildings.
Yeah, right. That aesthetically, this is something that a masculine impulse says, I can put confidence in this because it's big and imposing and intimidating and, dare I say, beautiful. I'm not calling him beautiful, but it's
brash.
right. So and this is what I'm noticing a lot with converts to Orthodoxy, to even Roman Catholicism, is that there's a really disconnect with a lot of these guys in regards to the hierarchical structure. Like the actual leadership of their churches are not in alignment with their highest values, but also that that the lived experience that they're chasing after it's like their aesthetical graspings are distracting them from the actual meat that informs these things. And I'm by no means a minimalist. I'm a huge liturgics guy, and the reality is, though, that the spiritual life is what informs these things. So like the actual struggle, and it's like you're playing an RPG. You can't get better armor without killing some slimes and getting some gold. You gotta engage with things properly. And I think a lot of the guys coming into things are thinking, well, I've got my icons, I've got my prayer rope, I got my trad items, I got all the equipment, and I'm embodying it now, right? And it's like, well,
the warp.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of critiques from Protestants are valid, in the sense that it is a purely aesthetical activity. And even the ecumenical patriarchate, outright says, like, Orthodoxy is not a vehicle for you to adopt cultural Byzantinism. You're not adopting cultural Russian philism. Like it's not an aesthetical pursuit, in the strictest sense that to be Orthodox is to have a Greek church or to be Russian, whatever. I'm derailing things now, but this is all to say that the Zoomer desire for embodied participation is getting distracted at the pure aesthetic level, because that is something to grab onto. It's an actual good thing that they're grabbing onto, but it's a distraction.
It almost, to continue the analogy, there's also the impulse to win.
Yeah, right. Right.
The propositional argument of some kind.
Yes.
And it, like my age, we watched that play out in the new atheist movement.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of people went to new atheism to win, plain and simple. And so, and then like if you're going to claim a type of the apostolic succession, it's like, I win. Sorry, and as opposed to like that's forming your faith, or that makes you feel, or you have a belief that makes you feel like you're participating and connecting to Christ in a very intimate way through something like that, versus no, I'm staking my flag here, like,
very Protestant thing to do. It's the Protestant converts are, arguing which confession is the best confession of faith. I mean, this is nothing new. This is and that's
gamified, like you're saying.
Yes,
like
yes.
That becomes the game versus something like the way, I think.
Yes, right. It is gamification. My meta, because in these video games, right, there's something called the meta, right? The meta is the clear defined path that the community's laid out as to win in the easiest way possible. It's not actually about it's not about what you want to do. It's about what is mechanically the best thing. So if you're playing a fighting game, you're playing Super Smash Bros, and you like playing, you're playing on the N64, and you know what? You like Yoshi. You like a blue Yoshi just because that resonates with you. But everyone is playing Kirby because Kirby's incredibly broken in the Nintendo 64 version. And so the meta is you just default to Kirby and you'll win. And I feel like there's some metagaming going on with people clinging to, well, here's this apologetical trivia fact that no Protestant, no Catholic, no whatever is not going to be able to respond to. And that gamification also was born out of, I think, the blood sports community, which this was, we
Street
somehow
Fighter, Mortal Kombat.
No. This is related to Gamergate, which is for some reason your channel's turning into a Gamergate channel. Which is really bizarre. It's like 10 years late, but
dude, look at me. I'm a what was your comment, Christian? You're such a normie on my voice, on my Benjamin Boyce conversation.
Yeah, no, but the blood sports debating scene was kind of born out in this amalgamation of the Gamergate community to the alt-right space, the image board culture. All of this was kind of the pool that bore out this form of entertainment that was known as blood sports, where you would have people of opposing views come on and debate in a very uncharitable way. And that's hence the name blood sports. And you look at who's really popular voice in online orthodoxy, Jay Dyer. He was active in the blood sports scene.
He's mainstreaming blood sports right now.
Yeah, well, and
because he's like, come fight me. Like,
yeah. Send your best warrior. It's like Goliath. And it's really, it's fostering a lot of uncharitable, and
well, this is an interesting point because, which we've hit on this guy. I've been looking for this kind of conversation, so thank you very much, like that, to get some of this context. But to interface with the Redeemed Zoomer thing, because I look at somebody that appeals to 500,000 subs. There's something real that people, So what is the and so to have the conversation about it, and I would say, he recently came out that he's done with apologetics.
Yeah,
and that he really just wants to focus on encouraging, like, a more broad view of the save the institution type thing.
Yeah, and that's a sign of maturity, because I think he
was playing that game.
Yes, he was. Because he is informed by what's crazy about Redeemed Zoomer is now, like, Paul Vanderklay is implicated of involving himself in the same sphere as someone like Nick Fuentes. Because the Redeemed Zoomer comes out of this
style,
this milieu of this culture of adjacent to image board 4chan culture, with guys like Nick Fuentes, and this whole approach to argumentation and propositional supremacy. And it's no coincidence that this guy gets married and he moves out to the Midwest, and he's
Southwest. He's in Texas.
Oh, he's in Texas. I thought he was in like Kansas or Michigan or something. Anyways, I'm all over the place. But anyways, this goes back to the video game thing, is that he's actually just engaging with reality now. He's married. And this is like it's like an escort mission where you're always concerned about the well-being of the person who's following you or traveling to the same destination as you. And this is a step in the direction of kenotic agape love, marriage is like the loss of marriage in the culture is really a sign that the disillusion of the main line has reached its zenith, because that is like the most scalable participation in the kenosis of the incarnation, is to be married, and to live no longer for yourself but for another person. Anyways, I'm getting this is related to how Redeemed Zoomer got away from the blood sports stuff, is because he's married, he's going to a church, and the blood sports stuff is an identity founded upon opposition. It's kind of like what PVK has been obsessed with Jonathan Pageau, where he's focused on, you cannot have lasting unity with idea or with identity like rebel or heterodox or revolutionary.
What was the girl that he highlighted just the day or two ago? What was the name of her channel? Was Dismantle or something like that?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. But
the positive vision versus a negative vision.
Yeah. And the thing that somebody like Nick Fuentes or Jay Dyer has excelled in is rallying people towards a narrative of opposition towards satanic powers or some evil out in the world. And that is really the basis for the unity, is in opposition to the X entity or whatnot.
And we saw what happened with the new atheism, like, yay, now we're not Christian. And then it's like, but we have no positive vision for it.
Yes. And I truly believe and have lived that any identity founded in opposition will inevitably lead to dissolution. It will crumble. It'll crumble. Maybe it'll be asymptotic again, logarithmic, exponential, where it can last for, it can deceive you into a lasting peace, and then it'll crumble really fast. So
I guess that's also the idea of revolution in a way.
Yeah.
We had our revolution. Now what?
Yeah.
We were only defined by what we were
fighting against.
Yeah. Man, this has been good. So what's your, tell me, we're going to play a big reverse game, but you're obviously very steeped into kind of some gamer culture. What role did video games play in your life?
So here's where the curveball is really going to come at you. I just like being able to talk to people. I didn't have a clique in high school. I was the I guess the mysterious figure who would interface with every other group, and have some sort of. And by the way, I was voted to not be hung up on high school stuff, but I was voted most likely to take over the world, which is very interesting.
Evil genius.
Yeah, conniving. But I think I learned from my dad, who was a salesman for plasma cutters and welding wire, and he had to interface with a lot of different types of people, from just the blue collar guys in the shop to the big wig millionaire execs in Chicago. And being able to interface with someone anywhere along the bell curve of whatever distribution, be it IQ, wealth, status, whatever, has always been something that's fascinated me. And although I don't really like to identify as like a gamer or something, but I did have experiences with relatives, friends who were steeped into that. There was something gripping about Minecraft or RPGs with the leveling up and the use of religious imagery often. And what I think something else that drew me to Orthodoxy was, my older cousin, who's about your age, he would play a game, Final Fantasy X, on the PlayStation 2. And there was the whole game is based off of pilgrimage and sacrifice. And there's reoccurring chants that are said throughout the game. And these chants are vehicles to summon these fearsome creatures who will fight beside you and whatnot. And I guess as getting older, it's there's been a realization that is like that's true. There's something that changes in the room when we sing the Paschal Apollytikion, Christ is risen from the dead, during Easter. And there's something that is strange about it, because it's you say that at that moment. You're not going to sing that outside of the season. You're not going to sing Good King Wenceslas in the middle of March. There's something about the right place at the right time, the right thing. And this is all in the book of Proverbs too. Like, I'm not making this stuff up. There's something that really spoke to me about the right inputs at the right time. And I think that's something that is stressed in video games as well. Obviously, you have right to put the right inputs at the right time.
But extrapolating that out to embodied practice in a religious space. It's interesting when you said that about the Pascal.
Yeah, Easter. You can call it Easter. I'm not. It's not a problem.
So what's interesting is, when I was a worship pastor at a church, and we were adopting liturgy, we were adopting a general kind of a more serious look at the church calendar. And I began to think, as I was like trying to plan these services, these liturgies, I was like, within the evangelical music machine, I was like, there's only a handful of songs that really work for Good Friday.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I thought, like, well, I don't want to play these any other time of the year. Actually, I had that thought, and I was like, so these are all our church is always going to sing these on Good Friday, so that people like know what to expect, and these things become part of our life, and these become part of our year. And I thought, and like one of them is a song called "Lead Me to the Cross," so that makes sense. And I was like, and I kind of started thinking about that for Easter. I started thinking of, obviously, we all kind of get that for Christmas, and kind of, but I was like, because that's what evangelical world kind of had, Easter and Christmas. But there was like these other things, and I began to think, because we don't have a lot of songs about sadness and suffering. Oh, we kind of need something like, and if we do, I better hold on to it and use it at this time, because this is the input, like the right input at the right time, like to use your language.
Yeah.
I begin to feel that impulse in trying to be purposeful with liturgy, like not just follow the wave of trend, but like, because what I was willing to say at that point was like, I'm not interested in new songs for this day. I want a song to be the song of this day for many years. And so I think that's go ahead.
No. That's exactly something that I was really obsessed with, was this notion of, how did the early church do X service on X day? And what's really interesting in Orthodoxy, and maybe it's true for Roman Catholicism, I don't know, but our oldest hymns and our oldest acts of worship are the ones that we do the most infrequent. Like our whole Easter week-long service, very old. The hymns that are the oldest are, you're going to hear them maybe once a week. But so what was struggling for me, and I think you can relate to this, is I wanted to get away from the arbitrariness of what I perceived as arbitrary sentimentalism in worship music, because I realized that the music that you sing when you are worshiping is actually very, very important. So, yeah.
And it's hard to, things, the digitization, which is another type of deconstruction, made things change faster and faster, because even like, say, the movement of the modern worship stuff 25 years ago at the turn of the millennium or whatever, things still would roll out so slowly that you could get these things to be sung in these congregations, and there was time for these things to sink in, but then it was like, oh, now instead of there being like 4 writers that were basically covering all of Western evangelicalism, now there's 10. Oh, and now there's 50, and they're all writing, and there's these few mega structures that are putting out stuff every year.
Yeah.
And I kind of had that conversation with I mentioned that with Alfrael, but that's just to kind of reinforce that point. And again, like, I'm not coming at it from the right doxology, right worship. I'm not coming at it from right worship culture, but definitely pointing at something like it together. And that would be the other conversation I was kind of interested to talk to you about, which was, I'm going to say the word and then you can just go, which is ecumenism.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's a word that is abused by both sides to sound like the enlightened centrist here. And it's more so being abused, I think, by the more conservative in nature, where there's a hermeneutic of suspicion cast upon anyone that throws that word around. But the funny thing is, the ecumenical patriarchate of Constantinople just straight up said, like, ecumenism is not for the basis of watering down any particular thing, but rather to very TLC related, to use dialogue for mutual understanding and respect, because there isn't a self-awareness that there were developments wherever in the world that were driven by particular events, culture, language, you name it, that inevitably would grow into conflict with other parts of the world. Like, for example, the schism between East and West. Everyone likes to focus on the filioque as the main thing that caused 1054. There's a whole lot more that was that you could maybe say that was the straw that broke the camel's back or something, but
or the excuse even.
Yeah, the excuse. Yeah, sure. And this was in many respects an inevitable consequence between diverging expressions of civilizational religion.
Culture.
Yeah. Right. So I believe that we will see a radical change in how this has been approached historically. Ecumenism was something that was kind of and I think this is where the disdain from the more conservative base types, they look at the ecumenism of like the 60s or something, where it was like, we can just ignore things and just come together like hippies or something, like that's really the caricature I think people have in their mind when they think of that. But the reality is now that we are in a world where religious participation is being re-examined and reappreciated, but that's also being met with disillusions of communities and low birth rates, and there's a lot of things that are making us disconnected from one another and disconnected from the idea of a community. And I think that with this reset, this population reset that is going to be playing out long term, with the people that are having children are religious in nature, and there's going to be more of a longing for, let's say you have a random guy in South Dakota, excuse me, who is interested in sacramental liturgical participation of whatever kind, and is seeking like this, mere Christianity, and is reading church fathers, and is basically like, I can see the validity of like Anglicans or Catholics or Orthodox, whatever, but there just seems to be a particular cultural baggage affiliated with all these. And I think this is something that's going to naturally play. There's not going to be somebody that comes up and says the magic words to convince people, oh, you just need to become X, this or that or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be an organic process of recognition of what actually matters. And I think what actually matters is a combination of, theology does matter at the end of the day. Liturgy does matter at the how you worship. I think worship's actually the most important thing, and theology is informed by worship. And so you have theology, worship, and the actual embodied ethical life. All three of those kind of form what I think truly matters at the end of the day. And Paul Vanderklay said this back, what Orthodoxy in America's contribution to Christianity in America isn't going to be everyone becomes Orthodox, but rather it's going to be creating awareness and consciousness for the rich deposit of, Christian
history and
tradition and thought. And, this is what the main line in theory should have been. It should have been the non-disruptive mode of being for a Protestant to say, I like
St. Gregory of Nyssa.
Yeah, right. And I like icons aesthetically, but I don't know if I could kiss them or something, like that seems a little far-fetched for me. So I'm just going to be content with reading my, church fathers. Okay. Yeah. And have a light lectionary from, where we have some basis for, participation in the transfiguration of Christ or the Ascension or Pentecost or whatever. So, yeah.
I'll tell you, since you bring that up, like this is the book that I used for our church, our little house church.
Okay.
It's called The Worship. It's put out by Paul Vanderklay, Calvin College.
Okay. Interesting.
Sometimes I'm not as heavy on some of the more Calvinistic liturgies within it, but like you mentioned, like it has a section for every day that you just mentioned: Ascension, Transfiguration, obviously Advent and Easter and everything, Pentecost. And for me, that was new, I completely embodied that within our worship this year in a really, low way, but in an intentional way. And I'll be honest, whenever the way that you unpacked that, it brought a lot of emotion to me, because as somebody that was in kind of a liminal church space, as I've kind of talked about, which honestly is that embodied some of that spirit that you just talked about, that gave people a space to, in the Protestant landscape, in the evangelical landscape, I should say, to, I was raised Catholic. Oh, they did the Apostles' Creed this Sunday. Oh yeah, that's, I remember that's part of home, and I know that's like nothing compared to a full-on Orthodox liturgy.
Sure. Yeah,
but,
sure.
But but the aim, I guess, of what you're talking about is something that resonates with me. And even just, to be able to have a charitable conversation, and like you said, and that some of it, you didn't explicitly say that, you did earlier, but that dialogue is going to be, which was what that ecumenical council that you talked about said, that a big part of it is actually this, that what we're doing right now, and being like, well, yeah, that does make sense. I might not be able, like you said, to like make that complete leap of, practice or something, but I understand. And
Mhm.
and I think that's a positive vision.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the past is marred by a sort of suspicion, a sort of because here's the thing: French Catholics who, had a completely different experience than the Saxon Catholics that Luther was immersed in, and just like the English had a different experience. And so when these moments, these extraordinary moments in Christian history flare up, like the Reformation, um, it's easy for some pious Bavarian Catholic to look at, well, what the heck, what's going on there? This is preposterous. But there were problems, and there are always problems, and it's kind of like a family. Every family is going to have some level of dysfunction, and it's very hard to diagnose what the problem is. Especially, it's hard enough being in the dysfunctional family and giving a diagnosis, let alone being outside of the family and giving a diagnosis. And I think we have been afforded this moment of relative peace to kind of figure this out. I think it's a great improvement that we're not waging a 30-year war against Protestant and Catholics, or that Orthodox aren't massacring Latins and Latins aren't massacring Orthodox. I think this is probably an improvement, to say the
Probably.
least. Yeah.
But
So
one of the things that you said earlier in that nexus of what Protestantism could have been or something, in my conversation with Roy Clauser, he kind of tried to like point at some theological inference between Luther and Calvin and Orthodoxy as they were exiting Catholicism, that he thought that there was actually there was at least a spark of something that could have been more related to that. I don't know if you watched that at all whenever it came out, but and it's
yeah,
hard for me to
I'd have to go back
articulate.
for that. I'd have to go back for that one.
But he kind of thinks, and I guess it was in their view of the incarnation, that there was some piece of that, but I kind of pushed him a little bit, because, and I don't know if he really could grasp the context, but I was like, you and I can do this, Dr. Clauser. We can have this conversation. They were having to use letters that took months to get places. And I was like,
Yeah.
to try to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yes, they had great conversations with their letter. Like, I don't think he kind of got.
Oh, no. The correspondence between the Lutherans and the ecumenical patriarchate was abysmal. It took like 30 years to get back and forth. The Turks, there's a lot of turmoil. I read about this at when I was at Holy Cross Seminary, but yeah, we are at a point where the technology, thank God, has afforded us to have communication like this. And I think the cultural crisis of lack of confidence in any given church space has initiated an age-old thing that happens all the time. This is a perennial pattern. And I turned to the Chinese for this, which now we're going to go down another strange thing. It's called let me see if I can. I'm probably going to butcher the Mandarin. Dao Fu Go, which is the restoration of the way. Dao, right? It's in there. The restoration of the way, or reestablishing the way. And what this looks like practically is, you have in Western scholastic theology all sorts of arguments of, okay, we've accepted Augustine for this against Pelagian, idea of grace and free will and works and all this stuff, but and we're going along this way and this train of thought, and then all of a sudden we've hit this problem, and how do we it's kind of like a Hegelian, I guess, in a sense, where there's a necessity for a new synthesis to address a particular problem. But basically you had people arguing viciously in the West of what did Augustine really mean when he said this. And I think we're seeing a moment like that of what is really essential to Christian life right now. I think we're going through something like that because there is a lack of confidence in the participation, the theological landscape, the ethical landscape. There's a lot. It is a scary time to be engaged in that, but it takes courage, it takes boldness, it takes charity, and it's a difficult task, but it's what we got to do right now. And really, the solution to that is to just go to church, get involved, participate in the self-emptying love, and it's not going to be very heroic. It's not going to be very dramatic. It's going to be really dull and mundane. But
well, it's interesting. The part of that where you say you do these something. The part I would maybe want to add to that is don't seek out a conversation to win, because that's not a self-emptying.
Sure.
That's not a self-emptying, and that to me feels like what this is, and what some of the stuff that we're participating in on the internet is, to a degree, being able to have these conversations. And I would say, I mean, not necessarily like the Jordan Peterson arc of hero and courage or something, but but to get on the internet and talk honestly about your faith, about Gamergate, like even though the that's over a decade.
It's funny
that there is some. It does take some either foolishness or a measured amount of courage to think out loud. And I think that's part of. I mean, in one of the early videos I made, when I kind of was like reaching out, I didn't know I was, but I was reaching out to Jordan Hall through this, like, oh, Billy Graham saved Jordan Hall. And I clipped this thing from Rebel Wisdom that they interviewed Paul early on in the Peterson, because he was the only guy, just the only Christian.
Oh, yes.
Talking about Jordan. And he's like, well, people are thinking I'm crazy, or they're going to think I'm this. And he's like, getting on YouTube is maybe something for people that don't have a lot to lose. And it took courage for Paul to do that. And in the face of what his peers, and talking about this heretic, being excited about this heretic. And I think we're all, people can downplay that kind of stuff. I kind of think that, I mean, I know for a fact myself that I'm here talking out loud because of that. And then a lot of people are, so I think I would add that. And to that point, I want to get one of the questions I wanted to have for you is like, how much impact and influence we've talked a little bit about Jordan, but like, did Jonathan Peugeot have on you, being that he's Orthodox and online spaces and this corner and all that?
Yeah, I think he just helped to reinforce that I wasn't crazy, to understand and appreciate how the lack of arbitrariness in worship, especially somebody who was, a little bored and bizarred out by the liturgical rubrics in the Old Testament, and trying to grasp that whole situation, and to realize, oh, there's actually some sort of human intuition for correct worship that has come from above to below. And this is something that I was really excited about with Orthodoxy, was this, this is something that is not unique to Orthodoxy, but I think it's stressed more so in Orthodoxy from Saint Justin Martyr, the Logos Spermaticus, the seed of the Logos that is in humanity. Well, particularly the seed of the Logos that enables man to have an intuition of what is good and right. And so, Confucius was very wise and has very valuable things for anyone to read, Christian, non-Christian, whatever. And it's not, it's a demonstration that God is not fully absent. God's not absent for anybody. He's omnipresent. He's and even those who did not hear the gospel or were not familiar with these stories could contribute in a meaningful way to the spiritual development of people. And so where I'm going with this is, Jonathan, I think, helped bear that out, that there, and with language like, Jonathan used to stress this more than he does now, but this eschatological vision of the New Jerusalem, where the kings of the earth fill their glory with it, that I think has to do with what I was just speaking about with the seeds of the Logos in man, that each tribe, each tongue, each location in the world has a particular beauty to the Christian experience, that. Hold up one second.
What are we?
All right, let me show you what I mean. I'm a practical guy. This is related. I'm not just rambling here, but look at this. This is a big book of Bibles. It's just
Cool.
a bunch of different manuscripts.
Can you show that? Can you show that the front, the cover? It's a really cool cover. Yeah. Okay. Very nice.
And so here we have an Arabic, or is it Coptic or is it Arabic? It's an Arabic gospel from Egypt. And so you can see this. And here is, let me find it. Pardon me. So, and then here's one from Armenia, so there's those are beautiful manuscripts, and there's a sort of uniqueness and properly placed diversity, like a Christmas tree. It's all these different ornaments, and they bring together a gestalt effect, even with all their idiosyncrasies still maintained.
Are you talking about the unity of multiplicity? Is that what you're talking?
Sure. Yeah. Well, well, and that is also fundamental to the idea of theosis and the communion of the saints. With a human being, a human person is a unique and unrepeatable instance. There's no one. Sorry, T. Grog or any materials out there. There will never be another Christian Baxter in existence that is the fullness of Christian Baxter. And through in the eschaton at the end, the glory that will be present is because of all of these different personalities that have been fully immersed in the grace of God, that bear out the full potentialities of each unique individual. And there's a, you know, I guess what Jonathan taught me was a true appreciation for cross-cultural artistic pursuits and cross occupational arts in the strict sense of the word art, like techne, that you know, the world is truly a magical place and a truly diverse place, and these insights can only be derived through life. It's like there's things that are poorly conveyed through word alone, and I think that is also going back to the evangelical focus of the spoken word. Is there's an intuition that is borne out that there's some sort of lackness of authenticity in the strict adherence towards the spoken word in you know, like a lecture kind of sermon kind of thing, that you have to experience, you have to speak to it, and when somebody who has experienced it, when they say it, it comes off completely different. Like I'll wrap up by just saying this, you know, but when somebody says, like, let us pray to the Lord or something, or let us pray about this. It's one thing when, like, and I'm sorry to throw him under the bus, but like a Joel Osteen would say it, versus a monk that I know who lives in a garden tool shed in Boscoville, Wisconsin. You know, when one of them say that, it's a completely different sentence, because there's been this embodied experience that is that they've earned. And I know that's kind of like a dirty word. I'm not saying that in the sense of their, you know, by their own works they were deemed worthy of this, but to
You're not talking
insights,
about soteriology.
Yeah, right. Some insights, just like some degrees of love, are hard fought and earned. And so anyways, I'm rambling now, but
Well, I mean, it's different. It's different when say now, like a Vietnam vet would say to like a, you know, a Middle East Afghan soldier, like, you know, good job, son, soldier, versus if, you know, I said it. You know, like
right.
they earn the right to say something that has a deeper meaning through what they have done in the way that they've done it.
It's the level 99 warrior saying to the level 23 one, yeah. I remember beating that boss. Good job. You know, there's
to take it back there. But I do think that there is a flatness in the almost the binary of saved, unsaved. There's nothing in between. Even though theologically there is, you know, the word sanctification comes out. But the way that it's presented and the way that it kind of gets, you know, it's like a, I'll just say this, like a Christian pastor that's wearing like this on a Sunday morning doesn't differentiate his level from me. And should he? Well, we're all sinners, brother. You know, we're all have fallen short of, you know, and so there's a flatness.
Yeah.
And just that we're on a binary of like saved, unsaved, or something like that. That, as opposed to, I mean, I saw it was who's the Lutheran guy that's hangs out on YouTube?
Dr.
Cornell.
No, never mind. I'm thinking of someone else.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
Jordan Cooper or something.
Jordan B. Cooper.
Yeah.
He was talking about vestments, and that they should represent an office that would indicate holiness, that would indicate a deeper, like a level up of what it means to trust somebody. And that it's not just a title, but it's embodied in the vestment. It's embodied in the office. That office should be able to hold a type of trust, and that's why that betrayal isn't a flat betrayal. There should be more, it's there shame from that betrayal.
Yeah. And what do you expect? What do you expect the president to wear?
Suit and tie.
Yeah. Would it be weird if he was like wearing shorts and a t-shirt, like,
Well, I mean,
yeah.
but we've seen that kind of
Hierarchies are transform things in a very visible way. And those visible ways are not to be mistaken at a superficial level. That, there's a famous line that, the cassock doesn't make the priest, but that's some will use that to say, well, you don't need to look like a priest to be a priest. But on the same token, you should look like a priest if you're a priest. But it's not every priest who wears something black has something, special about them, right?
Yeah. It's complicated. Because that I heard a illustration used once that there was like a general from the army. He was retired and he was sitting in the airport and he saw I guess the guy maybe that replaced him, and he's walking through the airport with an entourage. He's in his, his uniform, and he realized that because now this general that's retired is just sitting there by himself in his civvies, and he's like, that wasn't happening because of me. That was happening because of my office.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the understanding in Orthodoxy, is that it's out of respect for the office of the priesthood, and that it's actually a form of egoism to be like, I'm gonna downplay this.
Yeah,
but it can go the other way too. I mean, you can have somebody who, spends outrageous amounts of money because they want to have the coolest vestments, but it's really detaching yourself, because it doesn't matter what you think, and at some level it doesn't really matter what the people think. It ultimately matters to the whole worship in itself to God, but it also does matter what the people perceive it as. Like the flock should perceive that there is something different about this person as they are going through these motions in a worship situation. And even one of my former mentors, I really didn't like him when he wasn't in vestments, but I liked him when he was in vestments, because there was a mode of being that was changed, and it wasn't superficial, and it wasn't magical, but it was, anyways.
He embodied the spirit of the office when he put on the suit. And there's interesting things to think about, even with comics related to that. There's interesting things to think about, even with big box evangelicalism, where I've got to wear these kind of sneakers, and I've got to wear this Louis Vuitton X, to embody I think it's wrong, but they think that they're embodying who we should, strive to be, or something like that.
Right.
And it is a hierarchy that it then becomes explicit. And I get this from being a person that was in a rock band. Like, you want to embody the avant-garde, and it actually separates you from the audience. Like, if you have the skinniest jeans at the time, and if you had the deepest V-neck at the time, like, you knew who the band was when they walked in.
Yes.
You know who the priest is when they walked in.
Right.
And that, and then you can embody that, you embody that I'm separate from the norm,
and that's what holiness means, right? Is the separation. Yeah.
And so that's where some of the extreme versions of the modern touch on those those intuitions, I think, with the lights, with the smoke,
Oh,
with
yes.
with the
Yes.
vestment of
Yes.
these things. I think that they're actually like kind of coming to they're like kind of pointing at something, and it could be the yin or the yang.
Mhm.
I don't know, but I've had that sense for a very long time that, they're aiming at a cathedral, but it's the simulacrum of the
But
cathedral.
what Christian, but here's the craziest part of it all, okay? The liturgical practice of Christians was informed by the Roman pageantry. And so it's like we're doing a weird thing where secular culture has informed certain branches of evangelicalism to, worship in a certain way that they perceive as highest in the hierarchy. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, that's how it was back in the day too,
And
like,
so, but then you kind of, so we want the band members to, like, we accept that they look avant-garde because that plays into this, that they're more.
mhm.
They're transcending my ability to musicize. I want the pastor to show me the good life, and he's embodying the good life with his Patagonia sweater.
Mhm. Oh, yep, yep, yep.
Like,
Right, right.
and so I want, that's the model, and
Mhm.
and again, like, the medium is the message, and so okay, well, they both do something similar, but what is the message that they're, I guess, that medium is doing, or something like that. But it is interesting culturally that, what was new in, 1200 is not it
Yeah,
is
right.
obviously not new. What now, it's ancient and stood some test or something. But it, I don't know. I think those are helpful conversations to be, no, like, oh, no, this was always the holy and the true, or something, like,
Right. Well, and I feel for them because I had this epiphany at Epiphany this year at the Feast of Theophany in
mm,
women's monastery in Wisconsin. One of the most beautiful churches, Orthodox churches in America, is in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Anyway, St. John Chrysostom Monastery. Anyways, I was standing there, and it was the festal vigil, like 8-hour vigil.
was Kyle
And
Rittenhouse there?
no, no, yeah, right now. Maybe he should be there. I don't know.
Like, why do I know Kenosha?
Yeah, right. But yeah, so I was in this service, and I'm looking around, and it's like, wow, the degree of cultural sophistication that is going on here with the chanting and the candles and the iconography, the architecture, the woodworking, all the instruments that had a very particular name. Like, and here's the thing in Orthodoxy that's annoying is everything has a name because Greeks just, had a very particular sophisticated, like, this table is called this and that table's different because it's this size or whatever. So there's all this stuff going on. And I thought to myself, like, how could you have expected people, the pioneers, how would you expect the pioneers to have recreated something like this
Mm,
back in the day?
yeah.
And maybe people are working with the best they got in many cases, like these rock band evangelicals, this is the world they know. um should they learn things? Yeah, everyone can learn things. But at the end of the day, are they making the most with what they've been given, I think, is the big question.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things happen that I see from like being able to have a conversation with you, or other people downstream from Peugeot in the corner. And um where coming from where I've come from, like I said, I had some intuitions that were like, oh, well, that's true. That's why the Orthodox does this. I was having that intuition or something. And it's not just the Orthodox, but that was more historically, even with the traditions within parts of mainline Protestantism or something like that. But the interesting thing that I can see when I turn and look at the culture that I embodied for so long, and still do, I'll never just completely not be something that is like one of the biggest songwriters for the modern worship movement is a girl from New Zealand. Her name's Brooke Fraser. She was with Hillsong and all that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And she, like, even that song I referenced, "Lead Me to the Cross," was written by her. And she recorded chant recently for a project, and she was like using like King James Psalm.
Interesting.
And I was like, oh well. And people are all us 40 or 40 plus ish people are reaching back. They're reaching back to the 80s. Like there's been this new thing where people are seeing these courses from the 80s and 90s in a lot of these modern contexts and stuff. It's like, because some of them are simple and they're embedded in a culture that, oh, my parents, like, I mean, I've even done, like, because my parents know the song and now I know the song, and now more people are actually singing together, which is a good thing. Mm-hmm. And then, so I've seen there's these pieces, because it's hard for me to imagine that some of people, like, say within these modern movements like Passion or even some of the like Elevation, that they haven't watched, some of them haven't watched a Redeemed Zoomer video and been challenged by them.
Sure.
And to that point, where does that lead them? What is the algo feed them up next? And it's ortho thing or this conversation. And it's like, oh, well, I'm just saying, I think that we will see more integration of history, even within the big box that they've run out of steam in a certain, when you deconstruct all the way.
Yeah.
And then the other piece I wanted to say to that was, there was a huge Catholic conference of, did you see it?
Yes. And in fact, funnily enough, I think it was the previous one. The previous Eucharistic assembly was held in Mankato, Minnesota, where I went to school.
Okay.
And it was led by Bishop Barron, who is now his cathedral is right down the street from my church.
Okay.
In Rochester, Minnesota. Anyways, that's just a funny connection. But yeah, I did see that.
And they were doing the modern worship.
Yeah. Yes.
They had the rock band off to the side and the Eucharist, but they had like these bright, like green or yellow lights.
Yes. Right.
Pointing to the Eucharist, and there was smoke machines if they weren't incense, like creating the aesthetic that was. And I was like, we finally have come, like, this stuff I was talking about a decade and a half ago, or decade, like, is happening.
Yeah.
And it's and not, I think obviously many Orthodox people would probably look at that and balk. And
but here's the funniest thing, Christian, is that Patriarch Bartholomew was just he did a historic visit to Australia, because it's been 100 years since the Australian Greek Church has been established. Anyways, they did his divine liturgy
at Hillsong,
in like a stadium and they had lights, not like, obtrusive, but and they had the different camera angles, and it's the pageantry of
the modern conference.
Yeah, right. And where did they learn that stuff from? It was So,
you used Pro Presenter, which is the modern PowerPoint, which was created by the church and used at the Super Bowl. Like, it's interesting. I think some of that stuff interesting. There's a lot of technical things that you get a lot of reps doing something every week with technology. If you're trying to push those boundaries, that the church is actually an interesting place for some of that to play out. But when you
sorry to cut you off, but also even Bibles, even Protestant Bibles, everyone's trying to copy Protestant Bibles, because guess what? They make the best Bibles.
They look good. Like, there's an aesthetic that's nice.
And that's so, like, all these, it's there's layers to these things that are, being chased after, I guess.
Yeah. And that's why it's not the who's really winning. Like, oh no, now it's the Orthodox that are winning. Now it's, no one is, in a way, like,
I think everyone's down bad in a certain way, but it's also, I'm a pessimistic optimist, like I'm a jaded optimist, I guess, so
So we're kind of rounding down this conversation. I want to do the TLC navel gaze. So you said you had a conversation with Paul back in 2017, which was, I mean, early on, and then Peterson, that was 16-17 was really his first rocket ship. We're having this conversation in October of 2024 now. Like, what do you see in this? Do you think this is something, this is this relationality, digital relationality, embodied relationality, some of these conferences that they're doing? And I went to Symbolic World, and like, what do you see?
You know, a guy from my parish also was there.
Oh yeah, at Symbolic World.
Yeah. So anyways, fun, small world.
It is.
Sorry, I cut you off, but
no, what do you just like?
Yeah.
What do you think of it? What do you see? And are you you're part of it? I mean, here we are, and we go on Paul's live stream every now and then.
I guess I'm reluctantly a part of it to be a thorn in the flesh for McMo, but no, I'm kidding. I don't think it's an end to itself. I think it's more of a sanity check for people, because really at the end of the day, it's going to matter where are families being established and where are communities actively engaged with each other. And I don't think that this is like Paul said, estuaries church adjacent. This is really about, I think, equipping people with consciousness and deliberate articulation to diagnose the reality we are living in and how to best handle that for the next generation or whatever, right? And this is going to be more akin to a sower going out and spreading seeds, and it's, some fall by the wayside and whatnot. And so I think this will be remembered as like some, intellectual kind of movement or something that informed people, but I don't realistically see the TLC becoming something more than that. But it will play into the organic maturation and synthesis that will come out of this probably 150 years from now. So who knows?
This morning before I asked my chat bot AI, that I spent a little bit of money getting a subscription to. I was like, how big is this little corner of the internet downstream from Peterson, centered around centered around Paul Vanderklay?
Yeah.
And it said probably 10 to 15,000 people. I said, how many active? And it said, like, there's a rule of, I can't remember, it said 10%, 1%. It's like probably 1,500 people.
Yeah.
And then it used like the word lurker in there too. And
yes. Right.
And it was like, so like 1,500 people. And that makes like on a serious Paul video, like that's about like the, like, 1,500 or something. And we're all kind of, and then the amount of people that actually get on and play a little bit more like this.
Yeah. Even smaller.
Yeah. Like probably 10%, probably like 150. Like this is kind of a Dunbar of participation.
Yep.
And, but yeah, it's interesting. I know there's Chad, the girl dad, Chad, the alcoholic is, he and Neil are going to try to do an estuary conference, or not try. They have plans for an estuary conference in Chicago. Do you think do you think that,
like, I have kids? I can't just that's a long, but yeah, I would try to go to something like that, but I don't know.
Yeah. So then it becomes real in another way.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not everybody I talk to is as like, to me, this is kind of what as I'm shaped, this channel is shaping out. This kind of falls into the rando TLC version. And so, and so I think that these are good times to talk about it. Cause other people, like I'm not going to go inside language talk so much with Benjamin Boyce, right. But he is kind of aware of something. He was kind of aware of something.
Yes. Like, there's different clusters and there's certain overlapping areas. I think strike while the iron's hot. And I think, it's good that there are these various estuary groups and events and whatnot. But I'm like I said, I'm a jaded optimist. I'm pretty jaded about these things, and I've seen how communities can grow and eventually die. And I'm thankful for everything that Paul Vanderklay and people adjacent to him, like yourself, have done for continuing conversations around all these interesting and complex and complicated topics that we find ourselves in right now. And hey, God willing, something will come out of it, even if it's just a few families that have better equipped themselves for raising children and fostering a community in the climate that we're in now. So
this is kind of the spirit of Estuary. You know, that I think that's what I kind of like. I've never done it. I've been on one of Chad's. He's done like these digital ones. But I haven't done that yet. And but this is in that spirit of, and I do attribute it to Peterson from my perspective, because I think that people were feeling the clamp down of speech. I think, and
sure,
we're not in the same place we were a decade ago.
Yeah.
We aren't. I was feeling it, but but that to be able to say, okay, and I'm going to come and talk to people about things that publicly, oh man, I'm so scared of what if I say the one wrong thing, I'm going to get canceled, whatever that is.
Yeah.
That breaking down that fear of being able to have a genuine conversation. And like, even for my little town, like, the handful of people that know I'm doing this, they know me a lot better than they did if they watched a few of these episodes, and they can, it's out there. And so I think more of that is good. And with a certain level of responsibility, hopefully. But yeah, man. Do you have any final words, any final thoughts on this, or a question for me in the Paul Vanderklay sense? I don't know.
I guess my final question for you is, how do you realistically see the evangelical world adopting a more robust liturgical practice without it being disruptive? Overly disruptive, because it would be disruptive regardless, but overtly disruptive.
So there are a lot of interesting things happening. There's one of the early worship leader guys in the Passion Movement, which was put on by a guy named Louis Giglio, and they were 15, 20,000, 60,000 people conferences, kind of, in the Southern Baptist adjacent world. One of the early songwriters is a guy named Charlie Hall, and he's at a church in Oklahoma City. He hit that a limit as a songwriter. He went to seminary. He went to the Southern Baptist seminary. He was like, I want to go to seminary. And now he's at this church, or he's been at this church a long time, and they've got some charismatic, but they also appreciate history, and there is more robustness in places that it would surprise you how thoughtful the liturgy is in certain places. It's easy to caricature a rock band in a TED talk, and I can do that all day long. So when I say something like Brooke Fraser, who is this creative writer that I referenced earlier, is one of my favorite songwriters. She's one of my favorite artists. She's one of the most creative people, and she's deeply informed by C.S. Lewis, which, the patron saint of Protestantism, but it's like, and I'm sure I would almost predict that she's going to, if she hasn't already, that she's reading the Church Fathers, that she's going to. And I think that it's not going to be so disruptive in the sense that, these people are culture makers. You can't deny the fact that we live in now you don't try to start a church without your local rock and roll musician. Like you don't start an evangelical church without a rock guy or girl. And because of that, there's a culture and so these culture makers who are continually to mature, like Brooke Fraser, who recently went home to New Zealand, and the New Zealand Symphonic Harmonic whatever orchestra did a part of her whole catalog. So even like her music like is, oh, let's elevate this culturally with beauty and with history. Like, there's things that it's not going to be that they're going to become Orthodox.
Yeah, right.
But I do think, like, even getting on here, like I've had conversations with Catholics, with Orthodox, with Protestants, with people that aren't really Christians, and you don't have to go to a library, and you don't have to even go to a church now to be exposed to ideas and even have conversations about ideas if you want to, that will form and shape your doxology. And so I do think that it's gonna continue to I mean, I'm downstream from all of that, and my values have evolved, and I think that it's like I said, the fact that she wanted to do chant, like, where's that coming from? You know, like what was she watching? What was she listening to that made her want to do chant? And I continue to think everyone's reaching at this deconstructed state. Who has the answers? Oh, so when I was 25, and most of these people are 25, we thought that the boomers that were telling us to do church this way had the answers of what for life. And now that they're all that I'm 40 and that they're 40, 45, and we realize, oh, nobody has, like, oh man, you know, oh, all these people are still falling out in sin, and like Ravi Zacharias and myself and other people that like, we need answers that you guys, the answers that you're giving us don't answer that question. And so like, and that was the ceiling that you came up when you were 20 thinking about. And I think that's all going to play. So that's I don't know. That's kind of my answer.
Well, thank God it doesn't, you know, the future of all things don't rest upon you having a blood sports debate, you know, so.
Yeah, hopefully that will continue to change. So.
Well, thank you, Christian.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for coming on. This was fun. And I'm really glad we had this. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. So, man, dude, have a great day. We'll end this thing backstage.
All right. Thanks. Bye.